Everybody, just before the break, Brad, I promised that you could jump in on, we were at the end talking a little bit about the governor's race here in North Carolina. I know you wanted to jump in on that.
Sure. I mean, I think what the viewers just saw is this sort of laundry list of diversions. And what I brought up specifically were jobs and the economy and which side is more competent and capable to handle it. Let's look at the federal level under Democratic control. Under this president, this administration, which Hillary Clinton will continue, if not do even more damage, we've gone from a $10 trillion deficit in this country to a $20 trillion deficit. We have come out of this recession with very slow growth, slower than ever before coming out of a recession of this type. If you look at Democratic control in Virginia, which is what Roy Cooper's promising, they now have a $1.5 billion budget deficit in Virginia under Democratic control. Let's contrast that with what we see under Republican policies. Since Governor McCrory and the GOP have been elected as the leadership in North Carolina, we've gone from budget deficits to hundreds of millions of dollars in budget surpluses. We now have a $1.6 billion rainy day fund, which is wonderful when you have these potential catastrophes like Hurricane Matthew barreling down on our coastline potentially, and that's the highest that rainy day fund has ever been. $4.5 billion in tax relief, and that's returned to the people. That's across the board tax relief, and all while doing that and creating these budget surpluses. So I think there's a clear contrast with job growth in North Carolina in spite of what's happening at the federal level, and Republican leadership is to be thanked for that.
Scott, from your viewpoint, what do you think about what he just said about the last 8 years and how our debt got to where it is? What is your viewpoint on how we got to where we are and the problems that led up to what Obama started with in 2008?
Both parties are actually responsible for the growth of that. The bailout started under Bush. It was continued and expanded under Obama. So, for example, the automotive industry bailout began under Bush, but it was not only continued under Obama, but he expanded. So you have both contributing to it. However, beyond the debt, if you look at the deficit actually has been dropping. So, you know, as viewers know, they have their credit card debt that you have to build every month. They either have more money than they spend or less money than they spend. So the deficit has been slowly going back down. One of the problems, I think, is there is a strong debate about whether or not monetary policy was too tight. Monetary policy was, at first they go down to virtually zero, and then they say, okay, we'll try and get the loans out. But between quantitative easing and, trying to loosen up the money supply through things like that rather than traditional ways, has it stymied growth? And that's sort of, the traditional academic economist debate about whether or not those things have contributed. We have struggled to get out of this recession, but we have grown. And the national government has grown better than most states, although some states are always ahead. The interesting thing is when you ask folks, do you think the country is on the right track or headed in the wrong direction? And then you ask the state, even if the state, I'll give you an example from Winthrop, the Winthrop poll we asked in South Carolina, over 70% of people thought things were headed in the wrong direction at the national level. And that was both Democrats and Republicans. And you have to ask why. And the answer is the Republicans thought things were headed in the wrong direction because we have a Democrat as president. And the Democrats thought things were headed in the wrong direction because we have a Republican Congress who stymies everything. So they agree on the problem and they disagree fundamentally on the cause. And as I've been playing ping pong here, we're seeing some of the same issues, viewing the same problem but laying the blame differently. But the other thing is people tend to see their state as doing a little better than it is simply because they're more familiar with what's going on. So the state will often look better to people than the national government does, whether or not the economic numbers bear that out in reality or not.
That's fascinating information, and I want you guys to kind of jump in on this as we come into our Senate race here is very competitive. Certainly we're going to continue to talk about the governor's race. We have to take another quick break.